10:30 back on the Sports Fix. You're listening to North Central Florida sports leader ESPN Radio and ESPNGo1.com. Adam Reardon, Chris Doring, Scott Brantley with you on this Thursday morning. And as we do at this time each and every week, we talk a little Miami Hurricane sports with our good friend Danny Money of CanesInSight.com. Danny, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing well. Now, the University of Miami happens to be the center of the college sports universe at this point. We'll start with football, where the notice of allegations finally comes down the day after the NCAA admits wrongdoing and missteps, if you will, inside their investigation. In regards to the NCAA and some of the information you've gathered, we know that Miami says that, look, no further punishment is necessary here. We've punished ourselves enough. Is time served going to be enough for the NCAA, or are they out there to maybe hammer Miami a little bit more?
Well, it's weird. You get mixed messages as far as what's in the notice of allegations. Now, Miami being a private school, they don't have to release it, so it hasn't been released to the public, the actual notice of allegations. Certain portions have been leaked because it's sent to certain coaches at public universities, and the media's managed to get their hands on those portions, and that only relates to those specific coaches. Now, what's leaked so far really doesn't seem that damaging. Stuff like taking a recruit's parents to a box, buying a suit for Willis McGahee, coaches getting extra money from boosters or from Shapiro. So not necessarily Shapiro paying a player, but Shapiro paying the coaches. Really nothing too damaging. Coach Hill obviously got hit with lack of ethical conduct for not being forthright in the investigation, but that's separate from the malfeasance of University of Miami. So really, what we've leaked so far doesn't seem that bad, but Miami is upset, and Miami thinks that the NCAA's paid too much credence to Shapiro, and they're certainly preparing to attack. They made the famous statement that if Nevin Shapiro said something twice, it's considered corroborated. Now, the NCAA hasn't denied that. We'll see how that plays, but obviously on its face, that's pretty ludicrous. So the feeling right now is that Miami is going to fight anything that they consider severe, which is probably anything more than just minimal scholarship reductions, and certainly a postseason ban.
Now, with that being said, fighting against, I would say even small allegations. I mean, we've seen people get off of murder charges on technicalities when we know they're guilty, i.e. O.J. Simpson. I mean, these are for a flawed investigation like we've seen this far. I don't imagine that Miami would be willing to settle for much. And with that being said, there's always been a little bit of a testy relationship between the University of Miami and the NCAA. I see a bunch of cracks in the armor here of the NCAA. Is this an opportunity for Miami to potentially fight back and not only maybe seek justice for themselves, but create a whole new landscape in college athletics by basically showing how flawed the NCAA is and the fact that they need to restructure the oversight of college sports in general?
Well, this whole thing really is about power and how it's been swinging. When the allegations first came out, all the power was with the NCAA. Miami was kind of forced to tuck it between their legs and just try to play as nice as they could, knowing that a lot of the stuff might have some juice behind it, and obviously as a willing witness in Nevin Shapiro. So ever since all this is broken and, story after story about these really absurd things that the NCAA has done, the power's completely shifted to Miami. And the most important thing is on Miami's side, which is public opinion. Now, the NCAA doesn't answer to any constitution, and to the extent they do, they've shown they're willing to break it. So it's not the same as a court of law where there really is something to be accountable to. However, when you have the whole public calling for the resignation of the president of the NCAA, and you have story after story about these things that, it doesn't take a genius to read these stories to see that something was really, really smelly here. That's the big transition, just that public opinion. And that's what's going to cause changes. It's not necessarily going to be a lawsuit by Miami, which would probably be an abuse of process lawsuit or anything like that. It's just going to be the continued pressure put on the NCAA by the public, and that's what's going to cause changes. And that's why Donna Shalala issued such a strong statement. Once she finally had the upper hand, she just emptied her guns on the NCAA because she knew now is the time to push it. Now is the time to really fan the flames of the media and put pressure on the college presidents who form the Committee of Infractions to make a decision in Miami's favor and to move on from this.
Hey, Danny, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's kind of interesting here. Is we've known Miami to be the bad guys publicly for 3 decades now, and all of a sudden they look to be the good guys. Kind of an unusual position for you guys to be in, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what position is not unusual, and that's being the center of attention. It's funny how Miami, even when they're performed really badly on the field for the past nearly a decade, they're still so relevant. Well, obviously, when the story broke, it was on CNN. You saw it everywhere. And now it seems like Miami's going to be the one that really breaks the NCAA's back, which is really ironic. And you're right. Miami has become the good guys in this investigation. And obviously Miami fans are biased, but they can say, look how Miami's conducted themselves throughout the investigation. They've been completely open, completely transparent. It actually came out in the report that Miami knew about the NCAA using these depositions improperly, but didn't report it because it didn't want to appear uncooperative. That shows you just what kind of bullying effect the NCAA has, where they can be caught red-handed doing something blatantly wrong, and the school they're investigating is afraid to even report it because the NCAA is the judge, jury, and executioner. So Miami is being painted as the good guy now, and I think it deservedly so. And when you read the notice of allegations that have leaked, you're really not seeing anything too severe. Again, I'm biased. I'm not a journalist. I'm a fan. But you're talking about a suit for a player. You're talking about a meal at Benihana's. You're talking about visiting a skybox. You're not talking about buying recruits, 20,000, 30,000 payments for recruits, fixing grades. It's actually the opposite. Miami's academic rating throughout that entire period was among the top 10 in the country. So a lot of the hallmarks of these investigations isn't present in the notice of allegations, at least to the extent that it's been leaked.
Danny, I guess the approval rating of the NCAA is probably at its lowest point, and you look at Mark Emmert being the head of the NCAA, being the president. Who governs the NCAA? I mean, I've already seen that one shot across the bow when I guess he made the choice of blowing out Julie Rowe Lash, the vice president of enforcement, in her role with the Miami case. Who governs him, and did he make that choice, or did they do it as a group, the NCAA?
Well, I mean, ultimately the choice was his, but the person he has to answer to ultimately is going to be the colleges and the college presidents. And from everything I've heard, and again, it's never unanimous, but a lot of these presidents are upset with the enforcement branch of the NCAA, and it's obvious. I mean, there's been so much turnover, so many firings. Not just Lash, but others have been fired. There was a story a few months ago where one of the people involved in the investigation sent a letter to the former players basically saying, if you don't testify, we're going to believe what Shapiro's saying against you. And it's just bad press after bad press. The Shabazz Muhammad investigation with UCLA, the Cam Newton scandal, the Penn State, USC, where it was found that enforcement officials had actual malice, had a grudge against someone at USC. I mean, it's just been so much that the college presidents at this point have to be fed up with enforcement.
No consistency whatsoever. I mean, they're all over the map when they're dealing with these cases.
Unfortunately, it sounds like they've been consistently bad for a while, as a matter of fact. Danny Money, CanesInSight.com. Danny, let's move to something a heck of a lot more pleasant for folks down there in Coral Gables, and that's the basketball team. Up to number 2 in the country right now. The thing that impresses me most, now if you looked at them over the last couple of weeks, they're eking out these wins. But to me, that's impressive. As the number 2 team in the country, you're going to take everybody's best shot. Miami's done that to this point and still found ways to win, both at home and on the road. Got to tip the cap to Jim Larinaga and what that basketball team's been able to do this year.
That goes down to coaching and also goes down to experience. I mean, so many seniors on the team, and then Shane Larkin, a sophomore who plays like a senior. That's really what it boils down to, that consistency, that ability to win games at the end and to play with a target on their back, even though Miami's really not used to being in that position. They're just such a rare team in terms of their senior leadership. And you see it in the tournament every year when a team that doesn't have the McDonald's All-Americas makes a run just because they play together so well and they can handle that stage. And I think that's what Miami brings to the table. And another good thing that happened to Miami basketball yesterday, with the notices being leaked, or the portions of the notice allegations being leaked, is really, it looked like the allegations against the basketball team are pretty flimsy. So it's hard to imagine, even in a worst-case scenario, the basketball program taking too much of a shot from this. So, it bodes well for the future and certainly momentum in recruiting has never been higher than it is right now.
Well, let me ask you this: wasn't one of the initial allegations about the payment to Daquan Jones? I mean, that was of all the things that you ever read, that was always the one that had the largest price tag attached to it. So, I mean, is that basically out the window now as well?
That's out the window, and from everything I've read, and obviously you saw Daquan Jones, he was allowed to come back and play last year, so that was kind of a sign that this was going away. And based on what's leaked so far, it seems like that has completely gone away. And again, that was really the only instance of Shapiro claiming that he bought a player. He never claimed to buy a football player, $5,000 to the mom or whatever it is, which you always see in these cases, which is why I always thought this case was very interesting, because it lacked those hallmarks of the classic recruiting scandal, which is either buying players, fixing grades for players, or both. So I thought that was very interesting. But yes, that's been dropped from everything I've read.
Real quick before we get you out of here, let's talk about a negative of this basketball team, if there is one. Obviously, they're looking more and more like a top seed. But what scares you the most in terms of a matchup where Miami may be vulnerable as they get into the NCAA tournament?
Well, Miami's a pretty balanced team, so I don't think there's necessarily one matchup that can really just throw them off. It's just a matter of, when their three-point shots aren't falling, they're vulnerable. The last 3 games they've played have been tough games. They've been able to pull them out, but they're going to be a different caliber of team in the tournament. The ACC's down this year, and while they're certainly battle-tested, they've never been to the tournament, really. This is an NIT team for the past few years, so it's just when you're talking about a one-game single elimination tournament, you just worry about they're not hitting threes and they can get into trouble. That's their Achilles heel. If they're hitting threes, they have the balance and experience to be really tough to beat.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, man, the best in the business covering the University of Miami. As always, Danny, appreciate your time on Thursdays, my friend. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have fun in Vegas.
I appreciate it. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest here on the Sports Fix. Coming up on the other side of the break, we'll turn our attention to Tallahassee. Ira Schofel, the Tallahassee Democrat, will talk. They are not having the same success on the hardwood. We'll talk about that with him coming up next. You're listening to the Sports Fix on ESPN Radio.